You could write it down. I did that in summer. You could write it down, but I think part of the better strategy you can have is just being a really good listener. All the coaches that, even if they never said anything, if I was talking to a coach and he was making eye contact with me and he was listening and he was providing things based off of what I said rather than just waiting to speak, even if we didn't go anywhere, even if we didn't find an answer, the fact that you had somebody there listening to what you were saying and responding based off of what you were saying, not responding just to respond, you got a lot more out of the conversation.
Night Pitch, episode 20. Justin Wick. And we're going to roll out the red carpet. The newly appointed pitching coach for the Youngstown State University Penguins, Evan Johnson, is in the building, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm in the building every day.
Let's go. Listen, man, I had to roll out the red carpet at least in some degree. Super proud of my guy right here. I know all of our listeners that have been following along equally as so. Evan, what is the coolest part about transitioning from minor league baseball player to Division I pitching coach?
Dude, I didn't think about this really when I was playing until the very end. But you realize, I think when you first start coaching and you see something click for a player, you really realize why you played.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't really matter if I played in the big leagues for a day or 5 years. It's like, what does that even make a difference? Because it's just for you. When you see why you played come out through another player that you're helping, like you pass down that information, then it makes you feel more comfortable with your playing being open. You know, I don't know.
That's real too.
Really rewarding.
It's so like, I think it's a wholesome, like when you recognize that you're no longer just doing it for yourself. And I think this is something that, I will be the first to raise my hand and say I did not have half of the playing career that Evan Johnson did. I like to think that I had a pretty good run anyways. But when all of a sudden you're able to put the shoe on the other foot and you're able to at least look back in retrospect, realizing, all right, yes, I did have a good run. But I think it's so interesting when you think about your own playing career I had a junior college professor one time that said everything that we do as humans is selfish. And I was pissed when I first heard it. I was livid. I was like, no, that's like a horrible way of living. And then I thought about, I remember I went home, I called my dad. I was like this impressionable 18-year-old kid in junior college. I was like, can you believe he said that? Like, no, I like to think I'm a good human. I put good things into the world. And then my dad just froze. And here it is. I was like a month out of leaving the house, and I'm kind of sensitive to a lot of things like this. But I remember just the retrospective thought of well, first of all, that's actually a lot more true than I think a lot of people really take a minute to realize. So much of what we do is just inherently selfish. It is what it is. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying it's wrong. Sometimes it's good to go fight for what you're looking for in life, and that's okay. But I think that when you recognize that, you're still chasing the fulfillment, you're chasing the achievement that you're looking for within something that you're very dedicated to, but the fulfillment is now coming in a different sense of you're able to look at it from the top of the lighthouse as opposed to being in the ship itself, trying to steer your own career with all the other ships that are in the water. So I think that's a really cool context of it. I think definitely as it applies to coaching, that's very real. But, I think it's really cool. I think there comes a time in everybody's life when that switch comes together of you're no longer on the boat, you're on the top of the lighthouse. I just came up with that analogy on the fly. There we go.
That's a really good analogy, actually.
You know what? Here we go.
That's a really good analogy.
Oh, my goodness. No, but I agree with you. When you see somebody's eyes light up, I would go as far as to argue that sometimes that's even more rewarding and more fulfilling than actually being the one getting the job done on the field. And I wish more people had the opportunity to recognize that. My biggest encouragement, if you're an active player, find a way to get some of that in your mind, because that's healing. Like, if you ask me, that's a healing moment. And I think that brings a whole lot of perspective. But, I want to talk about as far as where you are and something is when careers end. Like, I mean, it's a somber feeling. If I remember the fear of having the pink slip in the locker, or, your career is going to come to an end at some point in time. Now that you are on the backside of this, and I understand, yes, you can still throw the hell out of the baseball. I'm not saying you're quote unquote done, of course, but it hit you. And I know that's kind of a strong way of wording this, but I guess what I want to ask is, how does it feel being where you are now, realizing that the end really wasn't all that bad?
I don't really. I mean, just because you have a lot of people to work with, you don't even really think about it. Because I guess when I threw and I did something, like I figured something out, I did something well. In my head, it was like, well, duh, you idiot. Why didn't you just do that every time? You know, it's almost like a oh crap moment. I should have figured that out faster. But when you help a kid do that, that's struggling, and you see it click with them, I don't have that same reaction. My reaction is more like, yes, I'm so fired up. Which I don't really like. When I would throw and I would figure something out, or I'd make a good pitch and strike a guy out, I never felt that. I was just like, well, why didn't you just do that 2 pitches ago?
Yeah, it's a consumption of I should have been doing this all along, as opposed to look what just this masterpiece that was assembled.
Yeah. So it's
my
like
goodness.
you kind of you build perspective in that way, and I think that might be what helps the most. I think.
Yeah.
And when I was playing, you could tell the coaches that were in it for the wrong reasons. And so far, I mean, I haven't been in the coaching world long enough to meet a lot of coaches, but just through playing and through talking to coaches and experiencing them when I was an older player, you could tell the coaches who were in it for themselves, and you could tell the coaches who cared about the players. And that was their main focus. Yeah. And I feel that if and I guess this is just kind of going to be my guiding light as I go into this, is always do what you're doing for the right reasons. And not saying you're not going to make mistakes, but you'll probably do better if you are doing it for the right reasons than for not.
I think it's an endearing way of framing it too. Like, I know that when Conan O'Brien signed off the Tonight Show for the final time, what he said to everybody, it was, if you work hard and if you're a good person, he promises that things are going to work out. Like, that was the way that he worded it. And it was very heartfelt and sincere, and he was emotional in that moment. But I think about, when you face the crossroads of when you really have to dig deep and potentially kind of reroute what it is that your identity has been locked into for such a long time, I can understand how there's just an inherent level of fear that goes into that. And like you mentioned, when it turns into the coaches that are maybe in it for the wrong or the right reasons, however that may go, it's always interesting to me to see the career paths of former players, that this is like what they do, of they're locked in. They know they want to be in baseball. They're playing careers to the end, but where does it go from there? I mean, I'll use my own example. If I leaned into the communication side of things and now working within marketing and a lot of creative initiatives that, I think certainly helps grow the game. I think coaching for many people is a natural transition. You'll see some front office executives that are former players. There's a lot of angles to go into this. I've even seen like a lot of ballpark operations people that are former players that, maybe they weren't doing the ballpark ops as a player, but you saw it every single day, and it's something that you can develop a passion for. So I think something else that is probably a good, maybe a reframe, I suppose, and this is something that I'm really curious of asking you, because I am fascinated at the concept of like hyper responsibility, or like extreme accountability, if you will, of just taking the ownership of, this is my life. I know I need to go out and do absolutely everything. This is the driving force of, you're taking weekends and you're not going out to the bars with your friends. You're just locked in doing what you need to do, getting your rest, getting your lift in. It can be very consuming as a player. Now all of a sudden you put the foot on the other, you put the foot on the other shoe, you put the shoe on the other foot, talking about if you're a coach. Now you still have that same level of hyper responsibility, but it applies to an entire roster of players. It's no longer just you in the trench of, yes, you're doing it for your teammates and you're carrying your weight on your team. It isn't just you in that sense, but as a coach, you are literally responsible for every single player that you're at least dealing with. So I can understand how that can be very consuming and perhaps intimidating, especially when somebody like yourself, as committed as you were for your own career as a player. Has it been interesting to balance that now that you're working with several other pitchers on your roster, or is that something that, I mean, I personally believe it's something that you were clearly cut out for. I mean, I'll wave that flag as high as I possibly can, but as far as balancing that hyper responsibility for where you currently are and what you currently manage, how has that been, and how has that transition been treating you?
It's almost more pressure than when you're playing
Yeah.
to be responsible. Because, I mean, if you're a coach who's in it for the wrong reasons, then you likely won't put in the effort that it takes to get to everybody. But, like, what I noticed from going to St. Cloud was, okay, you got 20 pitchers or 18 pitchers or whatever it is. Every day you have 18 conversations, right?
Yeah.
Usually,
That's so cool. That is so cool.
and they're all different things. So I'm learning a lot along with them. But usually when you're a player, you're just mostly worried about yourself and your responsibilities, and that's it. But like, I got to remember the next day what we talked about and actually have thought about it or prepared something to come back with, right? And if I forget for my own career, then that consequence doesn't confront me as much as if I forget for somebody else's.
Yeah.
Like, if I forget something about what they're doing or something that they needed, that feels way worse than if I was, forgot something about what I needed to do as a player when I was playing. But that responsibility is fun in a way because it's motivating, The only part that's difficult is when I'm at practice or whatever it is, and there's 18 guys doing a bunch of different things. I get questions throughout that process of, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? And I'm like, yes, after I finish this with this guy. Yes, after I go to this guy. And while I'm working on stuff with somebody, I'm trying to remember what they wanted to work on. And at the end of the day, I'm worried that, okay, did I remember everybody who asked me to do stuff with them today? Did I remember? Did I get it all? Because if not, and it's not even if they ask me, it's just when they're playing catch. You have 18 guys playing catch. It's like, how do you make sure that I'm not going to be as attentive to everybody at the same rate every day. But I got to make sure that nobody gets left behind. Over the course of like 2 or 3 days. But it's almost more motivating, and because I think you remember more often than you do the stuff about your own career because you're directly impacting the lives of these people as players.
Yeah. I will put this way. I hope every single player at Youngstown State watches this episode. And I hope every single player in your conference watches this episode, realizing there's somebody that cares this deeply about every single career of the people on the roster, man. No, I mean, it's cool, though. And I think that the cool kind of reframe in this context is recognizing that, what is it that we were put here for? And I think that, this maybe takes a little bit of a holistic twist. And this is maybe even just like a bigger, this could even turn into a spiritual conversation if you want to say it like this. But, what is your calling and what is there? Like, when you realize you have this time and it's been bestowed to you to go out and make the most of it, and your job is to enhance the gift of what it is that keeps us going and what it is that putting good things in the world to celebrate why we are here in the first place. I think that coaching is such a cool spot to be in because you're able to see those moments and you're able to see them so much, but you're able to see the different layers that go into this. Of, you can have a conference champion team that there's one pitcher that might throw a shutout. There's another pitcher that might not have thrown for the last 2.5 weeks, but they're in the same dog pile. Like, they're celebrating in the same group of people. Sure, their opinions are going to be a little bit different, but when you recognize those different layers of things and realizing that, after a big win, there's going to be some smiles that are really big, and there's going to be some smiles that maybe aren't as big as others. And that's just the natural flow of managing a team. And that's just, I would say humanity as a collective, that's just the way people operate. But when you realize that you take all of those multifaceted approaches into what do I need to do to give absolutely everybody something that they can grow with today? How can I make them inspired? How can I make them better? How can I lead them into the direction that they need to be led in, or at least the direction that we believe they need to be in at this point in time? I think that is one of the most undervalued skill sets, and I think that's something that deserves to be celebrated, perhaps at the top of human character traits. But I'm curious as far as, the strategy of where you're at. And I know that, you were a very attentive. I'll attest to this yourself as a player of you kept yourself very organized. You had a very solid routine together. I don't doubt a lot of my routine as a player was inspired directly from your routine, as a matter of fact. But now
You
all
were
of a sudden
arguably more
you're working
organized
with,
than I was, dude. You had
I burnt
everything
myself
down.
out on the backside. Goodness, I should have followed you more, and I should have trimmed mine down. So yeah, I guess there's different extremes that we can go to. But I think that now I suppose this is more of just like an operational approach of how do you keep. I mean, are you like a feverish note taker? Do you have notebooks that you keep all of this in, or how do you sort out keeping kind of a log or keeping an understanding of what your players need at any given point in time?
I think the best strategy you can have is you could write it down. I did that in summer. You could write it down, but I think part of the better strategy you can have is just being a really good listener.
Yeah,
Because all the coaches that, even if they never said anything, if I was talking to a coach and he was making eye contact with me and he was listening and he was providing things based off of what I said rather than just waiting to speak, then I got so much more out of the conversation. Even if we didn't go anywhere, even if we didn't find an answer, the fact that you had somebody there listening to what you're saying and responding based off of what you were saying, not responding just to respond, you got a lot more out of the conversation. And if I can, from what I've noticed, if I can do that and be fully present whenever I'm talking to a player or another coach, then I'm gonna be able to remember, because you can see it in their emotions when they talk. Because it's, as crazy as it is, like as a player, and we know this to be true as players, is like almost every event you experience as a player, whether it's a touch and feel in the fall or the biggest game in the spring as a college player, there's a ton of emotion attached to that event. It doesn't, it just because you're every opportunity you're trying to get as much out of it as you possibly can.
Yeah.
So it's easier to empathize with that emotion when you're better at just listening to that rather than trying to control where their emotions are at.
Yeah.
Almost
I
take
think
it in
it's a cool, it's a cool layer of really recognizing that, I suppose if you just liken it down to the Maya Angelou quote of people aren't going to remember what you said, they're not going to remember what you did, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. And I think that when you recognize those different layers of, I'll attest to this. I can remember one of the best coaches that I ever had. It was in the Northwoods League, as a matter of fact, Augie Rodriguez. I can remember Augie and I would play catch before games sometimes, which you don't see that out of a manager very often, first and foremost. But I remember Augie would be like, "How you feeling?" And maybe he recognized, I'm curious what he saw in me to point this out, but this happened maybe 4 or 5 times throughout the course of a summer, that maybe I was just a little bit drained or I wasn't feeling it as much as I needed to. And then I would literally go and warm up before the game playing catch with Augie. And the enthusiasm that he gave me in just those catch sessions in right field, I remember I was done playing and I was thinking to myself, I wasn't working on anything. I wasn't feeling anything that I needed to feel. I wasn't hyper analyzing. I literally just went out there to flow. And every single time I threw with Augie, I had some of the best throws that I had made of the entire summer. And it was just because it was as if somebody's presence was just there and it just helped regulate what it was that we had going on, which is something that, I'll say that's nothing short of a superpower, first and foremost. But I also think that, it's really special as a player to have the awareness of recognizing that, no coach is going to be completely flawless. No program is going to be exactly what you need, no matter how much money or how much time you commit to it. It's just, there's too many variables. There's too many layers that go into it. But recognizing that when you prioritize feel, and I'm not just talking about how your body feels, I'm just talking about like how your mind feels being present where you truly are. I think that's something that when you have a coach that's able to really integrate that, And when you have a coach that is so vested into this, dude, I want to go pitch at Youngstown now. Goodness gracious, let's be real. But like, no, I mean, I think that as far as, I mean, we can kind of wrap this up on this, and I'll turn it over to you. But recognizing that there's a bigger picture involved. You really see how big the picture can be when you're a coach, and you're not necessarily looking at it through your own lenses of what you have to offer as a player. But when you start breaking this down and you realize that maybe this is a little bit cooler looking at this from this sense, I think that makes it, I mean, it's hard to not view it as a blessing when it comes to that account. But I do want to add this, and, talking about, and I'll just do a quick rundown because, I mean, I guess you should do this on your sense, but I kind of want to steal your thunder because it's really cool, and I want to gas you up a little bit because this is an awesome story. You finish up spring training, you you accept a coaching position with the St. Cloud Rocks of the Northwoods League. You're up there for the entire summer, taking care of all sorts of business, playing every single day on a very pro-style schedule. And then you transition back into an area that you're accustomed to, the Division I baseball ranks, and getting used to, this is the new identity of, I'm going to make sure that I give everybody what I need. Was there ever a point in time where you were intimidated? And don't be afraid to wear this a little bit too. Like I want you to answer this just pretty raw.
Yeah.
Because I know this is true, and I know you might be trying to be humble on a public forum, but how does it feel to just absolutely believe in yourself going into this with the same aggression that you brought as a player?
I believe that I know how to help people with pitching. I believe that I know how to help any player build a good relationship with the game and their results and their development. I know how to help them be in a comfortable place of, I did everything I could today, I can relax. At the end of the career, I did everything I could to give myself the best chance, I can relax. I know how to help people with that. Going up to St. Cloud and coming here, I was incredibly nervous. Both times.
That's so cool.
Going up to St. Cloud, I was really, really nervous for the first day. And then going up here, I was really, really nervous for the first day. Still sometimes here I get a little nervous because I'm like, well, I have to make a decision about this. I don't know which one is really right. Or like in St. Cloud, being like, I have to make a decision about a bullpen. I don't know if it's going to be the right one. Or like doing a mound visit too. But I think what helps me is every time is it's like there is no right answer. And that's what's helped me is if I just go talk to a player, they're going to give me the answer. I don't have to give them the answer. They will give me that. And that's where I was like, oh, I don't have to really know the answer to everything right away. I know how to help them if I just know where they're at. If I know exactly where they're at, where their head's at, how their body feels, what their goals are, then I can just put myself in their shoes and we can just run with it together. And that's one of the things that I felt more comfortable doing as a pitching coach was asking, like, or just communicating or trying to communicate with the players. It's like, hey, it's me and you working on this. It's not just you and it's not just me. It's me and you. We need to be good at communicating. We need to be able to build a relationship with each other as far as I need to know everything you're thinking when you practice and every doubt you have, every fear you have, everything you're excited about. Like, make me an extension of your thinking mind as a pitcher because I'll never be ashamed of you for thinking a certain way because trust me, I guarantee you I've thought about worse when I was pitching too. I guarantee you I've thought about worse.
Yeah.
So
that is so cool.
And it's weird and I feel like, and going into it, the transition was weird because I would walk out every single day on the first couple weeks, even like a month into it, I'd walk out on the field with my uniform for game time for the Rocks. And I always felt like I was missing something because I felt like I had to have my cleats on. I was like, I am forgetting something because I feel like I should have my cleats and my glove and I should be doing something. And if I I think I'll continue to enjoy it. And I think I'll continue to be able to put my best foot forward as long as I can feel like I'm there with them as a player rather than separate.
Yeah.
If I can just feel like if I can empathize and feel like I'm in their shoes as a player, I feel like it will help them get more out of the coach player relationship with me.
Yeah. I think that this might tie into something that I've wrestled with this a lot, just thinking about this lately, of you have to earn your piece. And that's something that I've chewed on it. I've thought to myself, what does that really mean? But I think that, the natural progression of a player into recognizing what it's all about. I think that, there are some very actualized players that have been around for a long time. I'm not saying around of a longevity of a playing career, but the fact that they've seen these perspectives and they're able to be open. Like, I really like what you say of, the answer lies in the player that you're helping. Like, you
Yeah.
don't have the answer, but chances are you're going to get the closest to it by being receptive to who they are. And let's say, even if you did have the answer, if they're not receptive to it, it's not the answer. Like, if it's not going to be received the way that they need to receive it, so it turns into, how do you curate the message? How do you optimize this for the person that's going to ultimately be on the receiving end of it?
Exactly.
And, that's an art form in and of itself. But when you recognize that maybe that's the most important nuance of all. And is that what it requires in order for somebody to open their eyes? And I think that, you can really dive into a lot of complex thinking as far as how this can develop, but it's unbelievably rewarding. I'm going to get a little sappy here on this. It's unbelievably rewarding to see it happen to somebody like you, just because when you realize what that can mean for somebody else, and you realize that I do believe that the essence of life is captured in interactions like this, and it takes a willingness from a lot of people to embrace it. But that's when, I'll admit, when I saw you were going up to the Northwoods League, I instantly lit up thinking to myself, going, I know what these players are going to receive. And I know that the conversations that you and I have received of, like, the things that I would say to you, and then when you would say something back to me, and it was like, okay, let's unpack this for a minute. Like, it was just a huge, like, it was an ethereal level of understanding of, like, you had to go into it with the openness, but at the same time, that openness needed to be cultivated from a source that maybe we weren't in tune with previously. So I thought to myself, realizing that, when you recognize that such a gift like that has been put on a college roster of a coaching staff to help bring that out of a lot of people, it makes me very optimistic to believe that this game of baseball is in good hands with people like that. And I know this isn't saying anything new, and there's a reason that you're the co-host on the damn show here. It's because that, and that's why I wanted you to share these perspectives like that. But I couldn't finish this episode, and I could not finish the first half of episode 20 without just saying, first of all, so damn proud of you. This is, all right, we're going to have to cut this before I get a little choked up right here.
Well, dude,
Roll it.
Dude, we've been, it's the same exact kind of relationship as what we have. It's just like we've known each other for so long. We've had so many conversations just sitting in the apartment or doing this stuff or just over the phone. The sole reason why we started doing this is just because we just sat there and chat.
This is the essence of what this show was born out of. And now you get to do it for a living with all of these people.
Yes, dude. And then if you can cultivate, and I don't know how I've drawn so much out of our conversations just as friends, where if you can cultivate that in a coach player way, right? Obviously me and you are a little bit more loose when we're talking about stuff that, like when we're talking about pitching. But if I can cultivate the same feeling of like, hey, that coach cares about me. He cares about how good I'm doing. He cares about my opinion on how I think I should be performing, right? And he's not going to berate me for thinking a certain way. He's just going to help me get to the way of thinking that's most productive. That's when I feel like we're going to get the most out of it. And like you said, if that's the dialogue that we're having on a regular basis, then chances are we're going to trend up faster than if I just told them exactly what to do. Because and we all know that the placebo effect, it exists.
Yeah.
You can believe your way into reality. You can trick yourself and make things happen just by believing in it. So if I show the player that I believe in him and he believes in what I have to say and we're a unit working on it and we both believe we can get there, then there's a way better chance that we do. There's just no question.
We're going to run out of walls to run through if we keep on this path right here. I mean, I don't know if that's a bad problem to have, but no, it's first of all, thank you for being open on this too, because I understand that, this is something that, this is motivating. This is momentous when you're able to really captivate this and see it in the sense of, it's a conversation that has so many different layers to it. But ultimately, when you realize that at the root of it is enthusiasm, and how silly it is of just, if you're passionate about what you do and if you're perseverant, how much that can really grow and gravitate. And when you recognize, like you said, the coaches that are in it for the right reasons, the ones that are able to build that passion and perseverance out of so many other people, I think that that's a really cool way to organize thoughts. And I guess for anybody tuning in on this, I don't know if I want to call this a challenge, but, think of it at least from a shift in perspective of go have a conversation with somebody. Find out how interesting they truly are. Find out how they operate. Go into it with absolutely zero expectation. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Be authentic. Don't be afraid to wear that a little bit, but recognize that I truly feel like these types of realizations and these lessons and these really cool sources of enthusiasm, you can find it in absolutely everybody. I really do believe that. And I think that's kind of at the root of what it is that we try to build in a show like this, is recognizing, find the joy in absolutely everything. And it just so happens to be that we talk this in the game of baseball. So I sure as hell found the joy in talking about the journey of Evan Johnson here in the first half of the episode. And that was clearly the biggest thing that we were going to crank out. I might need to decompress a little bit with our little break here because I'm actually pretty fired up, but we will be right back. We're going to take a short little break here. You are tuned in to episode 20 of The Night Pitch.
I'll also advocate for my own personal story here. However, I was 4 years old when I went to my first ever game, and I was enamored by the city. It was really cool walking the city blocks. Okay, fun fact. Good times. You have two options when building a new Major League ballpark. You can build it in the heart of the city, or you can build it outside the city where it's super accessible. Is it this simple? Well, no, it isn't, but every single venue in Major League Baseball can be loosely classified into one of those two categories. Some ballparks are tied into the fabric of the grid itself. If we think more on the neighborhood side, this is exactly what Wrigley Field in Chicago is known for. The ballpark is the centerpiece, but it ties into the neighborhood, truly making it one of a kind. Now, it's hard to imagine any downside for such a beautiful spot to watch a baseball game, but lest we forget the logistics when it comes to 50,000 people arriving at the same spot. Other ballparks are not quite as scenic when you walk out of the ballpark gates, but some people might suggest that they're a little easier to access. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, cars were nowhere near commonplace, and ballparks still had to be accessed by the masses. Some of those locations were not the most convenient on paper, which is how we have the Green Monster at Boston's Fenway Park, and perhaps the main reason that baseball allows such different dimensions. Now we fast forward to where cars became more and more common, and that's when you started to see a design shift. Perhaps the advent of cars was a huge factor in the progression of ballpark design. It was not until the 1990s with Camden Yards in Baltimore and later Coors Field in Denver that we saw a huge revival of city-incorporated ballparks. Long story short, you are either in the city or you're in a parking-friendly expanse or you're in some extent of a baseball micro-city that the team built themselves. Think of all three on a spectrum, with each allowed to coexist to some percentage at each ballpark. Put all these together and you're looking at the modern mixing bowl of professional ballpark design.
Welcome back to the second half of episode 20. We have, as many of you that have been following the program might notice, our backdrops are strikingly different than what you might have been used to. On the right side of your screen, Evan is currently broadcasting live from Youngstown, Ohio, as we covered in the first half of the episode. I'll keep this nice and concise for my own because I want to dive into the topic that we've got going on. But on your left side of the screen, Yours truly, currently broadcasting from the River City of Sacramento, California, the capital city of the state of California, might I add. Evan, I bought an electric scooter. I take it into work every day. It's great.
Really? Tell them what team. Tell them what team and what
That's
you do.
right. All right.
Tell them what team, what you do.
So recently, I mean, I'll cover this nice and quick, but I used to work for the Baltimore Orioles, and I accepted a position with the Sacramento River Cats, which is the AAA affiliate of the San Francisco Giants. My new title is the Manager of Marketing and Creative. I love my job title. I actually really do. Manager of Marketing and Creative is what I get to do in the AAA ranks. So anyways, very much enjoying the Pacific Coast League setup. For those of you familiar with the Major League Baseball news, Sacramento is in the news quite a bit with the Athletics making a move next year, which a lot of business going on right there. Long story short, Sacramento is a very enticing place to be in the baseball world, and it's cool to be a part of it. I'll keep that nice and quick because I want to dive into the topic that we've got going on. But
That's
I
pretty
think
cool.
it
You
ties
get to
very
do what
well.
you do at the AAA level, dude.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, this has been unbelievably fulfilling. Like, I will say this, I absolutely love Sacramento. The ballpark that we have is tremendous. And I think the coolest angle of this is, we play so often. We have 6-game series, and everybody here is just so nice celebrating the game. And it's really weird. Like, I'll have pretty standard work hours, but at the end of the workday, the next thing I know is like, all right, I'm going to go for a walk. And I see our concessions workers just loading up their stuff. I see, ushers walking around having a good time. I'm walking up to them, putting a smile on people's face. They're putting a smile on mine. But it's unbelievable to think that literally every other day we have a game here, roughly speaking. And I get that escape of a reminder of why I love to do what I do. And it's because it's reciprocated within the people. So I get that, we talked heavily about your interactions as a coach and that level of involvement. To recognize that, humbly speaking, my job is to grow the game of baseball. And it is the coolest thing to be able to say that. It really is. So needless to say, it was a cross-country move that got me out here. But it's something you're very fortunate to recognize that and to also realize that, I think the AAA atmosphere really matches my persona and what I really try to project into the world because it still has the blue-collar, gritty, hard-nosed, nasty, overachiever type of attitude. But at the same time, it's a pretty high level here of, you got some dudes that are knocking on the door, that there's some quality baseball that's going on. So I think that it integrates very much so. Time, that's also true.
Some legends
and the perspective that you get to see. That's right. I've seen Johnny Cueto on this mound twice this year. It's incredible. Yeah, but I think that, it ties very well, particularly speaking as far as, Evan, like you mentioned, you're on your professional playing career. You go through the Mariners organization. You've played in so many different venues. You worked your way up to AAA yourself. Recognizing now you're back into the college ranks of you go up to the Northwoods League, which is a very pro-style league as well, and now integrating yourself back into Youngstown State of everything that they're able to put together just from the level that it is of, Division I baseball. It's a little bit different than the pro game. It's not, there's, of course, similarities, but the complexities that go into it, and this is something that I think has been really cool, particularly, my playing career, working my way through college, and now seeing it from a little bit of a different angle of, showing up to work in AAA in a different capacity as a player, but a perspective that's certainly endearing in a similar sense. It's been funny to really draw the differences of what are the major changes between the pro and the college game. And I think that this is such a very open-ended, interpretive type of discussion. But as far as where you are as a player, and I'll talk about in the immediacy of where you were in spring training versus where you are now, as far as just the style of play, is there anything glaring that like immediately stands out to you of this is college, this is pro?
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out to me the most is that a lot of the guys that you work with in college just have no real, I guess, perspective of what it's like across the other side of the door, right? Like,
yeah.
And it's
like you can't look forward, but you can look back type of thing.
Yeah, like they don't like.
Yeah,
there's a lot of questions about, and this has happened in the summer. Like whenever the draft came around, it was like everybody was on the edge of their seats for the draft. Like the draft was the
Yeah.
biggest deal. And if some guy got drafted in the 5th round, it was like, oh my goodness. And somebody got drafted
Yeah.
in the 15th round, it was like, oh, okay. You know, when you realize, like, when you play, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, you make it in,
Yeah.
and you're in, and then there's your shot. Like, the scales aren't that different because you got drafted or not. And we had a couple kids that I worked with in St. Cloud. They really started to understand that perspective of like, oh, okay, it really doesn't matter how I make it in. I just have to get it. Because the hardest part once you're in is staying in. That's the hardest part. You get in. That's hard to do. But once you're in, it's staying in and making it to the big leagues is the hardest thing you'll ever do. And the average shelf life for a minor leaguer, I don't know what it is since they downsized, but before they downsized, it was less than a year.
Yeah. That's so crazy. If you ask the average baseball fan what they think it would be, like that is such and that's before the downsize. There's even fewer spots now, and the population's bigger than it's ever been.
Yeah. And so like I'll try to communicate that with players is like, look, we should be preparing not just to get in, but like to be good enough to stay. Like I don't you go and you show out one time and you sign a contract, great, but what's going to keep you there? That's what we should be training for.
Yeah.
Like
that's really cool.
You should know yourself enough to be able to basically self-coach when you get in. Because professional baseball, while they give you the information that you need, it's fully accountable. You pitch poor, they're gonna tell you pitched poor. They're gonna say this is your action plan. You need to throw these pitches to these locations at these times to these hitters. Do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really interesting too, as far as like when you get so hyper focused on the end goal of, I remember when I was in high school, I wanted to get a Division I scholarship. All right, well, I got it. Where's the fulfillment beyond? There's always going to be a sense of wanting more, and like, where does it stop? All right, I got that Division I scholarship. I want to play pro ball. I want to keep climbing up through the ranks. I want to make my big league debut. I want to be an all-star. I want to be a Hall of Famer. Like, at a certain point, all right, well, you can be a pretty damn good ball player and not make the Hall of Fame. Like, it is what it is. And whatever that proverbial top of the pyramid is, that, all right, everybody's trying to fight to get there. But I think that it's such a surreal perspective of, particularly as a player, you put all of this time and this effort into getting to where it is that you really want to go. And this is something that I think has really driven me, at least to kind of reframe things now in the sense of, how much did I sacrifice the present moment because I was thinking so far ahead about where I wanted to be? And I think, it's so crazy to me to think that. And especially, you mentioned the average shelf life of a minor leaguer is less than a year. Correct. So all of a sudden, we recognize this. Statistically speaking, 12 months after you make your professional debut, you're going to be out of the professional ranks. It's crazy to think this.
Correct.
But I also recognize in that kind of sense of, all right, well, maybe we don't want to embrace that reality because that's a pretty dark thought. It is real, but we don't want that to be a thing, so we're going to work harder. How are we going to work harder? Well, we're going to run from the fear, or we're going to invest ourselves in where we are. And I think one of the coolest things, big shout out to my guy, Tyler Gillum, junior college coach at South Mountain Community College. If that name sounds familiar, that's because he is now the head coach of the Savannah Bananas. Tyler Gillum and I played JUCO baseball. He worked with the infielders. But I remember a quote that he said, and I don't know if this was directly from him, but it's something that he really embodied. He said, if you treat everywhere like the big leagues, you're not going to be surprised when you finally get a taste. If you treat everywhere like that. So now all of a sudden he's selling out Fenway Park with the Bananas. And I'm going, dude, we were sweating it out in 106 degrees in Phoenix right here. But I think that was something that, I realized this is maybe a different type of conversation of comparing. We started off saying the difference between the college game and the pro game. Well, yes, there is a difference. There's fundamental operational differences that exist within both of them. But if you treat both of them with the same integrity and the same intent, I think that sets you up for a level of success. Of, yes, familiarize yourself with the nuance that goes into both of them, but twist it around a little bit to just, like, don't be afraid to push that a little bit for yourself, which I think is really cool to me when I really started to frame it that way. So, I mean, I think in the sense that I'm not trying to tout myself here because I realize I'm not necessarily a player anymore, but when I've had interactions working on communication staffs of, big leaguers have come through, and I realized that there's nothing separating. We're all a human here. Like, we've done this. You're not necessarily enamored by who somebody truly is, but at the same time, recognizing that familiarize yourself with the operational flow of this is how this works. That way you're comfortable. That way you can be where your feet are. But to integrate that with the realization of the only thing that really matters is right now. And I think that is what makes people truly professional. And I think that's maybe the biggest difference of, I'm not talking about professional in a baseball sense, but professional as just the way that humanity operates of, it's amazing to me. I took a lot of this from you, by the way, so thank you on this. And I know that I'm probably sharing everything that I'm probably saying is something that you probably indirectly taught me. So I feel like I'm setting you up by using all of the words that you've told me before. But
the stuff that you're saying is. Go ahead.
No, it's all good.
Gosh, I was just gonna say this. The stuff that you're saying is exactly right, because it doesn't matter how long that you've been playing. The answer is never there. You never get to this point where you stop and you're like, "Yep, I figured it out. Now I'm a good pitcher forever after that, till I get too old where I can't throw it anymore." That's just not how that works. Like, it doesn't matter. You're in the big leagues. You're still working on stuff every day, just like you are if you're a freshman in college. You're just working on different stuff. You're just working on a new level of stuff. So if you have that realization, like you said, to put yourself in the moment and understand that, like, every day is changing and the game is always changing, then you can live a lot more comfortably. You'll progress a lot faster, because the nature of the game of baseball is mostly chance. You're going to be fighting chance the entire time as a player. And chance involves a large level of change. If you can't cope with change and be in the moment, dude, then you're not going to go very far.
Well, and I think that's just, it's eye-opening as well to recognize that sometimes I think it's, you actually put me onto this book too. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, written by Shunryu Suzuki. I think that I heard from this from both you and from Phil Jackson, the basketball coach. I think those are the two sources that put me onto this book. But it's, without dive, I won't give away too much of the context of the book itself. But the premise behind it was, in order to fully grasp like the concept of Zen, it's you embrace it with like a beginner's mind of the attentiveness. You remember the first time you ever used J-bands? I don't know if that's a weird, that's a weird question, but like, all right. The first time, your first time you did wrist weights, the first time you pick up a shoulder tube, and you're like, what the hell is this thing? How foreign it is. And you're entering it with a beginner's mind, up to the point that now when I grab a shoulder tube, it's like sometimes I forget I even picked it up, just because I don't actually use it anymore. No, all right, I get my playing careers. I'm walking around Sacramento with my shoulder tube. Here we go. No. But the premise being, we develop all of these habits and these routines to where, I was always a crossover symmetry band guy. I remember doing my crossover bands before games, finishing doing the bands, and then forgetting I even did them. It was ridiculous. It dawned on me too of like, all right, so I'm going into this with such a lack of attentiveness to why I do what I do. Like, I didn't get that. I didn't have the mind-body connection that I was looking for, and it was disconnected. So, I think that when you embrace it with a beginner's mind, and this is what I really wanted to get into of, you mentioned in college, they haven't seen the other side, and you're not familiar with the pro operation. You're maybe fascinated and you're maybe enamored by it, when in actuality, you might be giving up something that could possibly be your biggest superpower, and that is your beginner's mind to it all. Because if you maintain that, or if you find a way to maintain that, it's not to say it's good to not have experience. Like, experience is a useful teacher, and that's clearly something that's a benefit to have. But I think it's something that, when you recognize almost the purity and the innocence of how in tune with your body you can be when you try something new. Like, I just got into walking on a slack line, and I'm absolutely loving how terrible I am just because I'm focused on every nuance. It's the coolest thing to me.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wish I could forget how to do J bands to feel that again. And I mean, again, it applies to coaching too. When you get to watch that in somebody else, there's a lot of layers to this, but is there a way to kind of formulate this of thinking that perhaps inexperience can be valuable in that sense? Or, is that a huge separator that you've seen between the college and the pro game that, maybe there's some good that can come out of something like that?
I think, yeah. I think there is. I think like innocence is bliss, kind of in that way.
Yeah.
But it's less of like not knowing. It's more it's less of not knowing. It's more of like not expecting.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, when you surrender the outcome.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's more of like, okay, if I do something a certain way, I'm going to expect the expected.
Yeah.
Right? Like, all right, I did this today. I expect, there to be positive results doing this. Or like, I'm this kind of player. I expect to get drafted. Or like, I go in, I got drafted in the 3rd round. I expect to be catered to. Or I got drafted in a later round. I expect to not be catered to. When you get in and things change, but if you don't ever even have those expectations about good or bad outcome of whatever thing it is, then you go in with each rep of a shoulder tube, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna feel this out. I'm gonna just watch myself do shoulder tube. I'm not even gonna do like, and if you can go into throwing that way too, you can really learn a lot. Like we had a kid playing catch the other day, and I just told like he was trying to do this stuff. Like he went through the bullpen, and he was throwing, and he was frustrated, and he wasn't commanding the ball well, and he was trying different stuff, and it just wasn't working. And I just waited until it was over, and because he was just cursing himself out, doing it wrong, having poor results, because he was just expecting something to happen when it wasn't happening. But because we were so worried about that, we didn't even get a chance to learn what we were doing in the moment. So afterwards, I went and said, okay, we just need to have a higher level of awareness when we do these things, aka what you're talking about with Zen, right? Or like a beginner's mind, and understand that like we don't even need to do anything. We just go up there and we just watch ourselves throw a bullpen. Watch yourself throw a pitch. Like just take yourself out and just throw a pitch and just pay attention. And if you throw a pitch and it goes this way, you're going to know why, if you were fully aware of what you're doing. But if you expect it to be a certain way and you're like doing it over and over again, then we just completely take that awareness out of the equation. And I think beginner's mind and like Zen mind is just awareness of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And you carry that with you throughout your whole career, and you're going to be in a really good spot.
Also true. Yeah. Well, and I mean, even that, you're just going to be at peace with yourself too, which I think sometimes that alone is such an underrated quality, especially as it applies to performance too. I think that, that phrase surrender the outcome, I think this was born out of, I believe it was like a military story of there was 2 people that were in a foxhole. And if you're in a foxhole, one person's facing one way, one person's facing the other. And any potential threat, you got to call it out. Like you're kind of in the line of fire here. Well, you can go into that one of 2 ways. You can walk into this situation thinking, I need to be locked in and there's a chance that I could die. Like I need to be so focused and like this is a possibility. That's clearly not a baseball related thing because we're not talking life or death situations between the chalk here, of course, but the drastic example of this, just to take this to the huge extreme of, when you're talking life and death situations to where you need to make a decision, how do you separate the functional qualities from the emotional ones that exist of, in a baseball sense, this is what I do. I wake up for weights every single morning at 5 a.m. I power through this. I study the game. I look to how I can optimize myself. And how do I separate all of that weight, all of the investment that I put into my craft? This is what I do, to how do I let go of all of it to just let myself do what I need to do? To just, when I'm in that foxhole, I could die. if I think about it, I'm not going to perform very well. Like, I mean, if I recognize that as a reality, chances are it's going to negatively impact my job that I'm doing right now. So I think that's something, I wrestled with that a whole lot too. And I remember, especially when I was coming back from Tommy John surgery, I told myself, I'm not going to give myself any reason to believe that I didn't do absolutely everything. I had spreadsheets. I documented everything. I listed the weights on even the smallest exercises that I was doing. It turned into a pre-throwing routine that was just sickeningly long, that probably didn't need to be that long in the first place. But I did all of it with the comfort in mind of I did everything I could do. It was something that I felt like I could separate the reality, saying, yeah, I committed this, and I can live with this, realizing that if it's not enough, at least I did everything. What I didn't realize, and this is something that makes me look in the mirror and think to myself, you know what, this is a maturity thing, and maybe I didn't have it back then. I didn't let go. I put all of this weight onto I need to do absolutely everything that I need to do to get this directed. And it makes me think, I think that's a huge element between the college and the pro game. Because if you're a professional, you know how to let go. And I'm not talking about all professionals do this. I'm speaking of if you embody the characteristics of a professional, it's that you can separate absolutely everything that goes into it. And when it comes your time to just flow, you know how to do it. Which it is logic defying, I believe. I don't think the human language can fully describe this. So thank you for tuning into the show. Here it is, yeah, as we verbalize these things, our whole method of this.
I think one of the ways that I try to describe it to a lot of guys in St. Cloud who wanted to know what it was like and what it would take, for that mental side of the game, is that once you start to play longer, the more you start to realize that the answer, like we talked about in the first half, is within you. Nobody can sell it to you through a certain product. You can't just overload on planning and extra work to almost band-aid your confidence into thinking that you have it. Like, because at some point, and this is an analogy I used for some of the guys, was I would just ask him, I said, well, where are you living? And they say, oh, this host family in town. I was like, how far is it from the field? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Then say, well, probably 10 minutes or so. I was like, okay, so tonight, let's say I show up at your host family's house at 3 a.m. and I wake you up and I put you in the car and we drive 10 minutes over to the field. We get out of the car, we walk straight to the game mound. The lights are on, there's a baseball on the mound, and there's a catcher behind the plate. Okay? You have one pitch. You need to throw one pitch.
This is awesome, first of all. This is so cool.
You need to throw one pitch over the plate at your average velocity, your full velocity over the plate. And if you miss, your career is over. You can never play again. And the question is, do you have the confidence to be able to do that? Because ultimately, at some point throughout your career, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Are you ready for that or not? Because ultimately, if you are, that means you have the confidence here. Not through all the other crap that you do, not through the mantras, not through everything that you put into the baseball world. But if I gave you a baseball raw and said, do it for your career right now, do you have that? Because that's the confidence that it's going to take. Yeah. Because when you get into professional baseball and you're pitching in the minor leagues, at some point it comes down to that outing. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you did before.
Funny too, and it's not achieved through aggression either. It can be to an extent, arousal levels. All right, you know what you need to do, and you know where your body needs to be worked up the most. But I can recklessly be aggressive and throw that thing over the backstop. That's not going to get anybody anywhere. No. The realization of, all right, your career's on the line. That's funny. I'm thinking back on pitches of my career.
You say your career's on the line, but I'm taking everything that makes you feel comfortable out of it.
Away. Yeah.
life or death.
I want to try this.
Really?
I want to do this dude. I'm fired up now. Like, I want to do this. I want to just as like a case study. I mean, I know that my career is kind of over as a player now. Like, I want to wake up at 3 a.m. and try this.
But that's and that was my way of communicating that, was because like that's what you're preparing for in reality.
Yeah, well, what a cool message too.
That's what you're preparing your mind for in reality.
Yeah.
Because if your head is there, yeah, you can warm up and you do everything you need to do, but nothing throws you off. You have the confidence that you can do it no matter what.
Yeah.
Right? That nothing will ever throw you off if you have that kind of feeling. Because a lot of times younger players, like players who are in college and even younger players in the minor leagues, a lot of the stuff that they want to do for their throwing, they mistake that for stuff that they need to do.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's just more of something we want to do. Yeah, obviously, don't be stupid and like warm up, get loose, play catch. Yes, that's going to help you get loose to throw hard and strikes. Right?
Yeah.
Whatever. But like, take it to another level of where is your confidence level at? If you really had to test it, where would it be? Do you have enough confidence in you as a player? Because you have the answer, not anybody else. You're not going to be able to buy it from anybody. You're going to have to earn it.
Could you imagine just like make every single throw of your career that way too? Like, there's literally nothing stopping somebody from doing that. I'm speaking of the intensity type of thing.
Well, and that's one of the things that I learned that helped me, and I had a lot of good mentors that taught me this, was how to be committed to every pitch you make.
Yeah.
We had a lot of guys in summer who just, and the nice thing about summer was we got to take the stuff that we worked on and apply it right away. It was more like that pro ball world of like, okay, we can mix development with playing games. We can like
and there's
take
the opportunity every
apply
day.
it and all that. When we didn't think that was the case. A lot of players didn't think that was the case. They didn't think that you could do both. It was like, oh, I'm playing games, I'm getting game reps, that's it. No. Like, you go play in the minor leagues, like, you're gonna learn that you can develop and play games at the same time. It's actually the best way to develop. So we learned how to do that there. And we had a lot of guys who would go out and pitch and basically use like hope as their strategy. Be like, oh, I hope I go in and I hope I, could throw it over the plate today. I hope I have my pitches. Oh, I just didn't have this today. I hope that it goes well. But in reality, like, you can't use it as a strategy because baseball is largely a game of chance. So whatever you need to do, whether it's visualization, whether it's breath work, whether it's any kind of pre-pitch routine, you have to be committed and confident until the ball comes out of your hand.
Yeah.
Once it leaves your hand, you can't do anything. So you might as well just turn your brain off.
Yeah.
But before that moment, every single time we throw a baseball, we are fully committed until it leaves our hand. And at the end of the day, if you come in the dugout and you gave up 5 runs and you told me I was fully committed to every pitch I made, I had no doubts, no fears, no anything. Sorry.
That's awesome.
Just didn't work.
Yeah.
But
how cool that would be too.
Well, and if you do that every time, you start to build a better perspective about the game. You start to get to the point where okay, I did that for 2-3 years. I'm done playing now. I know that I gave myself the best shot to succeed every time I threw a baseball. And I looked for confidence within myself rather than within other stuff, right? To basically grow my relationship with the game.
Yeah.
And that's just a maturity thing. It's just like, it will come. But the point is, you have to have, and what I thought was good about summer was being able to give those guys the perspective of playing that is, it's just you. It's just you.
Yeah.
Do you have it or no?
Well, I mean, to recognize just like, it almost turns into just like a superhuman feeling too, of when you're able to separate those differences and realities. And I know like you'll hear definitions of you've got the physical, you've got the emotional angles of how do you prepare yourself. You've got different processes of the way that things go. But I think that, especially in the college ranks or even just call it amateur ranks in general, when you don't necessarily understand all of the possibilities that might go into a certain craft of, maybe you've never thrown in front of a pitch tracking unit before. You're not familiar with those types of things, and you realize the possibilities that exist of you start watching different videos, you're consuming all sorts of different information. Like I'll twist it this way of when I first discovered underground hip hop, particularly from the 90s. I know I stick with me on this one.
I was thinking
Like when I was in early high school and I started diving into this, thinking to myself, all right, there's so much out there. This is so cool. Now I'm to the point, there's very little that I believe I haven't heard, and not a whole lot of stuff really gets me fired up. Like the first time I went in and dove through, I don't know, one of Rakim's first albums or something. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, all right, well, now you're a little bit older, you're a little bit more accustomed to it. But I think that beyond this is the perspective to recognize when something is real. And I think that, my attitude towards all of this is, how do you stay in the present moment? I'll kind of use this to wrap everything up. And this is something I've thought about a whole lot, is just to practice gratitude in literally everything. Because, it frames it so much more simpler because you create this level of appreciation that tunes you with your beginner's mind, that helps you surrender outcomes because you're just thankful to be where your feet are at that present moment. And I think that, with all of the different topics that we've really tied together, I think that if you just practice thankfulness across the board on so much of it, not only is it probably going to lead you closer to the answers that you're looking for, but chances are it's going to make you a lot more passionate about what you do. And that stuff is infectious. I do believe that is contagious. And again, the coaches that are in it for the right reasons, I think that's one of the most highly touted qualities that exist for them. So I know you probably agree with me on this, but I'm actually curious to hear how you frame it in your own words too.
Just awareness.
Yeah.
If I can just have if I'm thinking about not even thinking about it, but just blending all the senses together. I'm up on the mound, I take a breath. I blend what I can hear, what I can see, what I can smell, what I can feel, all into one, and just have this awareness. It's it overloads enough to where I don't think about it anymore.
Yeah.
And it really is gratitude. But for me, it was getting to that level of commitment where whenever I lifted to go home, I never lifted with doubt. I never lifted with fear. I never lifted with anything else on my mind but that one thing that I needed to do. And it was freeing to take stuff out of my routine. I didn't need to do this.
Yeah.
When I realized I didn't need to do this, I more so did this because I didn't have the confidence that I could do it without it.
Yeah.
And for a lot of younger players, that's caffeine, that's ibuprofen, that's a J-band routine. Yes, get stretched, but you don't need to eat spaghetti the night before you start the next day. You don't have to. I promise you can do it. And that's the thing is, if it's not harmful, then go ahead, keep those traditions and those rituals, but understand that that's all that they are.
Yeah.
So that when it doesn't happen, you don't go tumbling down a hill like a snowball.
Oh man. Yeah. I think that's a fun way of twisting it too, and recognizing that, when you embrace that, first of all, we're human, which is something that it's so easy for us to forget that we're human, but it's such a true reality on so many different forms. But I think the true reality that really ties in all of this is recognizing that, there are people out there that have, nobody's alone with this. And I truly believe that everybody is in pursuit of that feeling. And I think, if you want to call it just a holistic throwing style of you are absolutely present when it comes time to attacking something. I think the really cool thing about this is when people are just unbelievably accepting of the differences and the layers and the complexities of how people can get as close to that feeling as they possibly can. I would go as far as to say that is what we are in the most ultimate pursuit of, or I believe that's very well it. even more so than the status of how far you played or what your dominance is on the pitcher's mound. I think that, that feeling when it leaves the hand of, yes, it clicked, is better than any paycheck that I think anybody can ever receive. I think that's part of just the love of the game speaking. But, that's chances are if you're tuning into this episode, I think there's a good chance that you guys probably feel that way too. That's pretty cool.
And and that's the battle, like we talked about in the front half. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you played 20 years in the bigs or a month in the minors or 4 years in college. When you set your glove down for the last time, how did you have a good perspective about the game enough to be able to feel comfortable where you left off? And that just comes with commitment and being in the present moment.
It's real, man. I think it pays dividends on the backside too. Like the lessons that you learn from this, they don't go away when you're done playing. And Evan, I think you embody that perfectly well. So that's what it's all about right there. This is it, man. Episode 20. We are in the books. Always cool to make this happen. I know that there's a whole lot of events that have transpired since our last episode, but we are so thankful that not only do we have a good contingency of people that are still tuning in with this, but, I'd like to think that our audience is not only bigger, but stronger and more vested than ever before. And I wouldn't want it with any other person than the dude on the right side of your screen right here.
Likewise, brother.
Evan, we're back, friend. Proud of you, brother. Thank you for being here, dude.
Thank you, guys.
So here's to life and every joy it brings. So here's